Hello, welcome to Menacing MTG. This morning we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do a little deck tech with you about my approach to building decks. I want you to understand how I approach building decks and my philosophy about that. Now, I build a variety of types of decks. There are some decks that are very singular in what they do, and everything it is meaningful in a deck to arriving at an end goal. And almost all of those decks that I'm aware of can be undone by certain other decks. I find I derive pleasure from building decks with multiple components that synergize together and that have multiple ways of winning games, even if one of them can't pull it off alone against certain opponents. Does that mean I win all the time? Absolutely not. Um, but I think it's terribly fun to kind of build decks. That's why I do it. That's why I have this channel. On that note, please consider subscribing, leaving me feedback, a like, comments, suggestions, anything like that. I really appreciate that kind of stuff. So I've got three decks we're going to look at today that kind of, I think, show how my mind works as I approach building decks. Of course, I watch other people's videos, some of the great legends, Legend VD, um, uh, Bad Boy Gaming, various others. But and all of us do that. We look at things to get ideas, but almost always do I not copy a deck piece for piece. I do things. I see either angles within others' decks. A Merchant is another really great. MTG Jeff. These guys are all great. CGB. So, okay, enough of that. Let's jump into this Tokens and Dragons deck. Again, we have three decks we're going to look at here. So, in this Tokens and Dragons deck, as the title illustrates, this deck generates lots of tokens. And there are some things that can kind of get in the way of token generation, but this is a big part of this deck. The other part of this deck is that it has these dragons, and the dragons can become very overwhelming, but just to have a dragon deck can be tough to kind of get off the ground and deal with kind of quicker decks. So this strives to strike a balance to being able to survive kind of those quicker decks and get you to that longer game. But either way, if you don't get the dragons going, you can win with tokens. And if the tokens aren't quite flying, then you can do it with the dragons here. So let's take a quick look. Of course, there's always in a good deck kind of supporting cast to make your synergies work. And in this deck, there's a lot of mana bump. So I'll go through the manas really quick here. One Castle Ardenvale for token creation, which you know is a theme here. 5 plains, 12 mountains, 1 clifftop retreat, 2 Needleverge Pathway, and 2 Sacred Foundries. Okay, there's the mana. Let's do the math here. 23 mana. Okay, so now that's enhanced by Mazemind Tome, where you can scry and draw cards to kind of get what you want quicker. Mindstone for bumping up mana to get to those dragons in a reasonable amount of time. Spikefield Hazard can also serve as mana, as well as getting rid of some pesky 1/1s. Skyclave, a little bit of exile removal there. And then I'm just going to tell you about, we have 1 Panharmonicon in here, and that is because there's some triggering that occurs in this deck, and this just doubles the triggering when it's on the board. Okay, so now without further ado, tokens. Okay, token generation really is by virtue of Krenko Tin Street Kingpin. 4 of these in the deck. While it's fragile, there are 4. It is legendary. You can only have 1 on at a time, but you want this on the board. You want it. Who cares if you lose it? Generate tokens. The other is Outlaw's Merriment. There's 4 of these in here, and this does multiple things for you. It reliably generates a token every single turn. You can have multiple copies of this on the board. There's 4 in this deck. Um, so another thing about this is it's a randomized thing which token you get, but the 2/1 token, they all have haste. The 2/1 token has lifelink, so that can really keep you in the game. So there you have it. Those are your two engines. Now, to enhance those engines, we have a few cards in here. 2 Angelic Exaltations. This works extremely good with anything, but particularly Krenko, because whenever a creature you control attacks alone, so say you have a 1/2 Krenko, it gets XX, where X is the number of creatures you control. Now, if you just have a Krenko on the board, nothing else, you have Angelic Exaltation, then it automatically, without the Angelic Exaltation, adds a +1/+1 counter to it for every time it attacks. So you're looking at a 2/3. Then Angelic Exaltation takes the number of creatures you control, 1, and adds XX to that, so that'd be 1/1. So then your Krenko would go up to a 3/4 and generate 3, his power, that number of goblin tokens. So there's that. You can have multiple Angelic Exaltations. There's 2 in the deck because it's somewhat important. You want to get it. So there's that. Then the next turn, you add yet another 1/1 counter to Krenko. But with Angelic Exaltation, only attack with one creature because it just bumps up that creature. Angelic Exaltation does not happen when you attack with more than one creature. Okay? So same here. If you have a 2/1 and a Krenko on the board and you're low on land, maybe you're going to go in with that 2/1 and that gets bumped up and gains you a lot of life. There are the other supporting casts. I just want to mention to you that there's a little bit of removal. I mentioned Skyclave. There's 3 Storm's Wrath, and then you have a Torbran, which just makes everything much more dangerous. Because Krenko tokens are red, Krenko's red, and all of these tokens are multicolored, and the dragons are all red. So Torbran, 2 extra damage for any red source. Okay, so there you have the tokens with one big exception. There's only one in the deck, but if you get it, tokens would go totally wild. I just put more value on Angelic Exaltation because it just makes, like when you get Krenko moving, he's much harder to stop when he's big. So he can be blocked, he can be taken out when he's small. But he gets big quick with Angelic Exaltation and is successful earlier. But Anointed Procession, whenever you create 1 or more tokens, it creates twice that many tokens, okay? So there you have it. Token mayhem here. All right, so then we're going to quickly shift right to dragons. So it starts off right here with Opportunistic Dragon. He's a 4-drop, 4/3 flyer, and when he enters the battlefield, choose target human or artifact an opponent controls. For as long as he's on the battlefield, gain control of that permanent. So this can be instrumental and very fortunate if you are playing somebody that has a human deck or a artifact deck. So there's the first dragon. Next in line, Demanding Dragon. Keep in mind, Torbran makes all damage done by red sources, creatures, or non-combat damage. Administer 2 extra damage. So, and there's just 1 Torbran in there. It's not really a key piece, it's just an enhancement. Okay, so we have another big enhancement coming up. Demanding Dragon. This comes on the board. It deals 5 damage to the target opponent unless that player sacrifices a creature. High impact card right here, okay? He's either going to do 5 damage or they got to sack a creature. And he's a 5-drop, 5/5 flyer. Outrageous, okay? Enormous value. Rapacious Dragon. Now this is in here because we want to get Drakuseth, we want to get Fiery Emancipation on the board. This guy's a 5-drop, but he creates 2 treasure tokens. So treasure tokens can be used as mana. So either you can get something bigger or you can get more things on the board. Rapacious Dragon, 3/3 flyer with the treasure tokens. 1 Sarkhan the Masterless. This card is overwhelming, especially with this deck. It's outrageous. It's a 5-drop, Again, don't forget you got those Mind Stones to help you get up here to 5 mana as quickly as possible, only with 23 mana in the deck. But this thing, you can go for its -3 immediately if it's got protection, like a few other flyers on the board, and you create a 4/4 dragon token. Token, did you hear that? Token. So, again, if you have Anointed Procession, you're going to create 2 of those. And until end of turn, for its +1, each planeswalker you control becomes a 4/4 dragon creature with flying. Okay, it's the only planeswalker in this deck. So, but now its core ability here: whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, each dragon, each one, you control deals 1 damage to that creature. So there can quickly become a time where the opponent attacking simply is not a wise choice because they're just going to get eliminated. So it can happen. It can happen fairly quickly. 3 Terror of the Peaks. Okay, here is a money maker. There's 3 in here, so you can lose one and not have to worry too terribly much. You're likely to get another. It's a 5/4 flyer for 5 drop. Spells your opponent casts that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. Okay, people can't afford to lose life against this deck. But this thing is that good. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. So if you have Terror of the Peaks on the board and you're attacking with Krenko with Angelic Exaltation going, all of a sudden five tokens or something come on the board. Each one of those deals damage. Okay, so and say you're doing that and bringing on another dragon, tons of damage being dealt. Okay, amazing card. Okay, Fiery Emancipation. This thing triples damage done by any permanent. To a permanent player, rather. It deals triple damage to that permanent or player instead. So any source, okay, that deals damage. There's 2 of these in here. It's absolutely devastating, and it is possible to get 2 on the board, which would mean 6 times the damage. Outrageous, okay? So you have the mana ramp, you have the Rapacious Dragon with its treasure tokens, Fire Emancipation, you want it on the board, you want Terror of the Peaks on the board, you want any of these big flyers beyond that come in. It's just pretty darn sure it's end game. Okay, let's continue on. Laughless Dragon Queen. This thing is a 6/6 drop flyer. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/5 dragon. Okay, just imagine you have Fire Emancipation and Terror of the Peaks on the board. You bring this on. It does 6 damage for this creature. You bring in another thing behind it. It creates another one, does 5 damage. If it's Fire Emancipation, 3 times that amount. Okay, it's just insane. DracuSouth doesn't have haste or anything, but he is a 7/7. If you have Terror of the Peaks on the board, 7 damage anywhere. When he attacks, he does 4 damage to any target, 3 damage to up to 2 other targets, then does the 7 damage that he himself administers. Hellkite Punisher, one of these. 6/6 flyer for 7 drop. Flying, obviously, pay 1. Hellkite Punisher gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Okay, and you can do that for as many mana as you want to spend and have. So there it is. You have this synergy of tokens, dragons, Terror of the Peaks, Fire Emancipation. Tokens come on with Terror of the Peaks. They're all doing damage equal to their power to any target. Dragons come on behind Terror of the Peaks. They're all doing it just gets totally out of control. This is an amazing deck. Okay, I'm going to put the links up to all 3 of these decks below on this video, and check them out because they are some kind of fun to play. All 3 of these decks are wildly fun. So that's it for the dragons. We're going to move on now. Okay, we're back with deck number 2. And this deck is very different from the Token Dragon deck. This is Cycle of Death, or better known as on my channel as the Ultimate Lockdown deck. This thing is outrageous. It is so fun to play. I can't tell you how fun this deck is to play. So the idea behind this deck is to take away all of the permanents that your opponent has, including lands. Okay, that is the goal, to kind of just shut them down. But this also has some ways to win in addition to that. That creates an obstacle, taking things away, but there are other ways to win. So the ways that this deck win, just simply put, are that opponents will fold because they have nothing left. They may be left with one land and nothing else turn 6 or 7. And they're like, I'm out of here. The next is that Brash Taunter is on the board. He's indestructible. And you drop haphazard, not haphazard bombardment, but rather Star of Extinction. That ends the game, okay? Brash Taunter on the board, Star of Extinction comes on, 20 damage. Everything's cleared off the deck, but Brash Taunter takes that damage and reflects all 20 of that damage back to the opponent. So that's 2 ways to win. A third is that Electro Dominance can simply do an enormous amount of damage to an opponent, wrapping it up after wearing them down. There's yet another way that this can happen, and that is to kind of just wear them down, and that is by virtue of having Klothys on the board. So he is exiling things at your pre-combat main phase, and if it's a land card, you get mana, but otherwise it deals 2 damage to the opponent, and you get 2 life. So you can wear him down with that, and with Karn's ability to access your sideboard with its -2. Now, we're going to take a quick look at the sideboard here. I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but so the sideboard does multiple things. It can bring on God Pharaoh's statue, which you bring on the board, you place it down, you've been taking lands away from your opponent. This thing does 1 damage every turn to your opponent, and spells cost 2 more to cast. Insult to injury. You're killing lands. This thing makes everything they play cost more. Again, Fold City, but wearing them down, taking the life away every turn. In addition to that, we have 3 Meteor Golems just because. If the opponent gets big things out, you can bring this on, whack them. This, even though you only have 23 mana in this deck, you have 3 Mind Stones, and you have other ways of generating mana. I'll take a quick look at that after. So 3 Meteor Golems. Stonecoil Serpent. So you have a ton of mana on the board, you bring him on, he's just hard to stop. He has Trample, Reach, Devastating. You also have little things like exile opponent's graveyard, Crystalline Giant, Heraldic Banner, and Myriad Construct. If you can bring this on kicked, it's very potent. It gets a number of 1/1 counters if kicked, which is just 7 cost, equal to the non-basic lands that your opponents control. So, that's dependent on the opponent's deck. But when this thing becomes a target of a spell, sacrifice it and create a number of 1/1 colorless construct artifact creature tokens equal to its power. So this is a tricky card that in some circumstances will fit really well. Say you're going up against a deck with a lot of non-standard lands. And if you're just desperate for a certain land to get on your deck to be able to drop that Star of Extinction or whatever, bring on Solemn Simulacrum. It gets you the land you want, and it's also a blocker that when killed draws you a card. So these things can just wheedle down an opponent. So let's get back to the main deck. So in quick review, I wanted to explain how this thing ramps up. So you do have 1 Explorer, which allows you to draw a card and play an extra land this turn. You do have the Maze Mine, 4 of these to scry for lands or whatever you need and draw cards. Mind Stone is a mana. You do have a little bit of removal here in the form of Murderous Rider and Extinction Event to get you out of trouble. You have 3 cultivates. Go get lands. Okay, then another key piece to this, which has, I'm just going to quickly run down the removal stuff. So you have here 3 land removals. That's not much, is it? I'm going to tell you something that makes that, will change your perspective a little bit. Storm's Wrath, removal. Haphazard Bombardment, you put this on the board, then you choose 4 non-enchantment permanents. Now this includes land. You don't control and put an aim counter on them. You destroy every one of them until there's 1 left. So it's going to destroy 3 permanents, 1 each turn at beginning of your end step. And it's randomized, but just devastating. Also, probably the most important card in the deck is Casualties of War. Choose 1 or more of the following: destroy artifact, destroy creature, destroy enchantment, destroy land, destroy planeswalkers. Can you imagine the morale of your opponent as this stuff is going on and on? Star of Extinction just kills everything but land, but does kill 1 land in addition to that. Okay, so now that's good stuff, right? But here's the kicker. We have 4 Bala Ged Recovery. So you play this card, which can be used as mana if you're in a pinch. You play this card and you can bring back anything you want. A Haphazard Bombardment, a Casualties of War, a Star of Extinction, a Storm's Wrath, Rubble Redding, or Demolish, which can also kill a artifact instead of a land. Extinction Event, you name it, you can bring it back. And then there's Gaia's Blessing, which is great for a couple purposes. Save you from mill decks, because when this gets put into your library from your graveyard, from your graveyard to your library, shuffle your graveyard into your library. But additionally, you get to choose 3 cards from your graveyard, shuffle them into your deck, and then draw a card. So between Gaia's Blessing and Bala Ged, I can't say enough about how important this combination is in this deck, because there have been times that I've used Casualties of War 6 times. Okay, it just is overwhelming. This deck can be beat, but it has a strong win rate for what it is. It's really powerful, ultra fun to play. So there's your multiple ways of winning. Primary win method is the opponent folding, but altogether possible that through Karn and the Brash Taunter, which, when you run Storm's Wrath, it does 4 damage to an opponent. Between those, you can just wheedle down an opponent and win. Same is true of Star of Extinction and Electro Dominance. Okay, we're going to move on to the next deck. Okay, here we are with deck number 3, and this is a deck I just am posting today. I will include links to all these decks, again, below the description. So this is the SAC Aura Regenerate deck. This is a classic example of, probably even more so than the other decks, of multiple ways to victory, but with synergy within each of them that is really amazing, in fact. So this is a deck full of lightweight, easily discarded items, real jank here, but together as one, they really work. And I highly recommend you watch the video from beginning to end of this, because I take on 3 pretty sturdy contenders, and this deck undoes them. So this is the only one of the 3 decks I'm showing you with Companion, which brings another layer to things here. We got the Lurrus. There's no other Lurrus in the deck because it is abiding by restrictions in which there can be no other permanents in the deck than ones that cost 2 or less. So let's take a look. The first avenue of victory here is with Hateful Eidolon. There's 4 in this deck. It's a 1/2 life link creature, but it has a special ability that when an enchanted creature dies, draw a card for each aura you controlled that was attached to it. So there are 7 auras in this deck that attach to creature. 9 auras that attach to creatures. Let's take a quick look at them. 4 dead weight, -2/-2 for a creature, and then Mire's Grasp, -3 for a creature. So you toss these on creatures, and if they die, Hateful Eidolon allows you to draw a card. Okay, that's a great thing. Removal with card draw as a benefit. They're very cheap items. 1 drop for the Eidolon, 1 drop for the Deadweight, 2 drop for the Mire's Grasp. Okay, there's one other, and it's something you put on your own creature. Frenzied Rage. If you watch the video for this deck, it'll give you more detail. I'm not going to go into it, but so if your creature that has this on it dies, you draw a card, in addition to anything else positive that may happen. So that's one avenue to victory. Another is Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven. You know this combo. This thing alone can win a game. When you get multiple ovens on the board, you can just go crazy, and people are losing life and whatnot. And there's supporting cast of things in this deck for every one of these avenues. So this is the second one. Witch's Oven helps other avenues. So then attached to this avenue is to claim the Firstborn, which you gain control of opponent's creatures that cost 3 or less converted mana costs. They untap, gain haste till the end of the turn, so you can use them. Then Witch's Oven can sack them. There is a whole nother sack thing going on here, though, that you should be aware of. So also Act of Treason, there's one of these. You can take control of any target creature and do the same thing as Firstborn. Again, Witch's Oven. So now let's move quickly to the sacrifice mechanism. In addition to what we just talked about with the Cauldron and that sack ability and Witch's Oven to sack things that you've stolen, is Priest of the Forgotten Gods. There's 3 in here. So you can sack things. If you sack 2 things, then the opponent sacks a creature of their own. You add 2 black mana and draw a card. Again, card draw engine here. So you're rotating things into your hand at a pretty good pace as a result of this. Add Lurrus to that, and you're rotating more things. So Priest of Forgotten God, powerful creature here in its own right. All right, and then we have non-combat damage. There's a number of means to affect non-combat damage, and that is that when things die, they do damage. We have Serrated Scorpion. When it dies, it deals 2 damage to opponent. You gain 2 life. We have Dreadhorde Butcher. This thing gains 1/1/1 counters for each time it attacks. When it dies, it deals damage equal to its power. So you have Frenzied Rage on it, it's that much more. Okay, so there's numerous things that deal damage when they die, and or come back on the board, which is our next avenue, and that is the graveyard, being able to access the graveyard. So there's a few different ways that we do this with this deck. Kaya's Ghost Form. I will advise you to use these if possible on Lurrus, which you do have to pay the 3 just to move it into your deck. But Lurrus is a valuable piece here because it allows you to play any permanents with a converted mana cost of 2 or less that have left the playing field and gone to your graveyard. You get to play one of them each turn that Lurrus is on the board. You have to pay their mana cost, but they are available to you. So it's quite an amazing thing. So you can bring back, say, the Deadweight Mire's Grasp and use them, and you get the huge benefit if you have the Eidolon on the board all of it. You can bring back the Eidolon. You can bring back the Serrated Scorpion. You can bring back the Dreadhorde Butcher. You can bring back anything in this deck that's a permanent because they all cost 2 or less. So just to further that cause, if you lose the Lurrus or you lose, say, the Dreadhorde Butcher and an Eidolon, you can bring both of those back with Call of the Deathweller, plus they get Death Touch or Menace counter on either of them. So 2 Call of the Deathweller. So you have a graveyard thing going on here by virtue of Lurrus, Kaya's Ghost Form, and Call of the Death Dweller. So these are all avenues to victory and then used in concert. I'm not going to go into it deeply here because I want you to watch the video and see how this actually works. There's 3 games that really illustrate it. Actually, none of the 3 games that are in that video show the priest in action. So you can not get the priest in a game and you totally still have a deck that can win. The synergy in this deck is amazing. These 4+ different focuses within this deck just synergize with each other, and this is what gives me joy, is building decks like this one here, which is all lightweight items that are pretty darn common. There are a few, Lurrus, the Priest, that are and the Butcher, that are rare cards, but they're lightweight rare cards and they're easy to get. I didn't. So very quick look at the supporting cast. Trespasser's Curse. It's an aura. When a creature is brought on the board by the opponent, they lose a life, you gain a life. We got 1 shock in here. We have, let's see what else we got in here. Serrated Scorpion, we already mentioned. And that's kind of the whole 9. Let's take a quick look at the mana. This is only 20 mana here. So you have 7 Swamps, 7 Mountains, 2 Blood Crypt, and 4 Dragon Skull Summits. And that's it. So I hope you really enjoy this video. Kind of may shift your perspective on building decks. This is what, as much as playing games, building decks is great. It's kind of gives me the juice. I'm really psyched to do it. But this is a good example of the concept of multiple avenues to victory as a deck builder's philosophy. So please consider subscribing, liking, feedback. Have a great day. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.